You're listening to Lexington Community Radio, WLXU 93.9, and this is Bike Talk.
Hi, I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Our guest on today's show is Scott Thompson. Scott is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning Coordinator for the Lexington area. Hi, Scott.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being on the show. And today we're going to talk about a new initiative, the Lexington Safe Streets Academy. It's a demonstration project. And before we actually get into the project and how it came about, let's talk a little bit about why you even thought about doing this. You saw a weakness in how we were going about doing things and doing planning and making things happen here in Lexington.
Sure. So, education is a big part of our professions, be it engineering, landscape architecture, and planning. And our opportunities are limited as to how we get that education. We do things like lunch and learns and 1-hour segments, but there's never a lot of opportunity for folks to really be immersed with colleagues and peer-to-peer training that really does change how you view your city, how you view work in other cities, and how you can really implement projects that we may not even be thinking about. And so we saw this as an opportunity to get together our engineers, our traffic engineers, and our planners and do some peer-to-peer training with other cities, in a real intense environment over a 2 or 3 day period. And, that's coupled with the demonstration project and other things, but it allows us to really see what's going on in other communities, really get that camaraderie and work together, which we already do, but really build those relationships that make it so that it's even that much more effective as we come up with design solutions for our community and how to make our community a better place to live, work, play, and to get around as it relates to transportation.
Yeah, and you had compared this a little bit to what the Chamber of Commerce does every year that you all have not been able to do.
Right. So for various reasons, there's not money really budgeted for us to travel for things. And that's understandable. We understand why that's a policy. But we do see that in the political environment that, the Chamber of Commerce takes some of our elected officials to cities and they come back with these great ideas and things that they want to do. And while I think that's great, I really feel like at the bureaucratic level or at the employment level are where those things really get designed and implemented. And the benefits to training that staff and to showing that staff what is out there and what we can do to really improve our city from an economic, from a health standpoint, and from everything that transportation affects is why this is important. And so we recognize the benefits of why that's there, but we were really looking for a mechanism to get some of our folks on the ground in some intense peer-to-peer training that can really change our community for what I think our politicians are looking for.
Yeah. And bring these folks together in a way that they normally can't come together and work together and learn together.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't currently really have a way to do that. And I'm not sure if we did in the past. It's just something that we don't have a mechanism for. And one is time constraints too. People have busy lives and busy projects and work keeps us busy. And so sometimes the opportunity is just not there. So we really saw this as a chance for that to happen. And so we applied for the grant application.
So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the opportunity and what it will afford you. What did you do? What is your process? Who did you apply to? What was this opportunity?
So the National Complete Streets Coalition, which is a program of Smart Growth America, put out a call for applications for the Safe Streets Academy grant program. Ourselves, along with 50 other cities, applied. We were called to sit for interviews, and so we did a panel interview, myself and a couple folks from traffic engineering, and then they selected 3 cities. So Lexington, Orlando, and the city of South Bend were all selected in that process, and we were extremely excited to find out that we were going to be a part of it because we really saw it as an opportunity and realized it was competitive. And so then we just have moved forwards with the process from there.
So out of the whole country, I think you said there were 50 applicants, and Lexington was one of 3 communities that were selected from that pool. That's huge.
Yeah, we thought that was a pretty big deal, and we really tried to celebrate that as much as we could with our press release, and then through some other organizations as well.
Well, wonderful. Well, who are you working with on this to make this happen? Who is involved?
So we have what we call our team cohorts. We have 3 people from our traffic engineering department. We have 3 people from our engineering department, and then we have 3 people from planning and 1 person from the University of Kentucky that works in alternative transportation there. We felt like it was important to kind of balance the team around those 3 components. We all work regularly on projects. But there's certain folks that we targeted specifically because of time that they had been here, their interest in the projects that they work on, and then how they fit into the development and infill, redevelopment, new development roles in those various divisions. So it's a team of 10 folks, and we've been to Orlando for our first group training, and saw their demonstration project. And then the folks were here about, the second week of February, they were here to look at our demonstration project, and help us work through some of the issues that we have there and how we want to use design to eliminate those problems. So we're excited. Then we go to South Bend at the end of May for the final steps of the Safe Streets Academy. There's also been quite a bit of online learning and interaction. We have learning modules that we work through at our desks or in a group environment. And so those are another piece of that education requirement that help us learn about complete streets, designing places for people, and people first kind of design 8 to 80, designing for the 8-year-olds and the 80-year-olds so that everybody can use it. And then also just getting together as a group and making sure that our demonstration project is on track to be completed and monitored during the April and May months.
So you are able to work with and learn with these other communities as well. It's not just your group working here together on demonstration projects and planning. It's actually working with these other communities too to learn from each other.
Right. So when we traveled to Orlando, the first day was just peer-to-peer workshop training. So we spent 8 or 10 hours just problem solving. So they would give us situations and scenarios, give us a background on that project, and then we would work through some discussions that we had, some ideas or some solutions that we had already had, and try to apply them to those. And then the second day is spent looking at the demonstration project that Orlando had proposed and giving them feedback as to how we would work with various engineering, planning, and traffic engineering measures to mitigate the issues along their corridor.
And that helps you learn as well, bringing those ideas back into our community for your planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's important is that it's not just about, the engineering and the infrastructure. It's about public outreach, working with different jurisdictions. We don't realize how good we have it. I mean, we are a merged urban county government. When we were in Orlando, they had 3 different governmental organizations that they had to work through for this very small demonstration project, and we have 1. And similar South Bend. South Bend has 2 jurisdictions. They have a city and a county government. And so that was one of the first things that they learned from us is, man, we wish we had that same thing going on in Orlando and in South Bend, because it really does make it kind of a one-stop shop. And so that, you learn things about your community that way too. So the community outreach piece is key. And then, the placemaking component, we can put bike lanes and sidewalks everywhere, but if we don't design in sense of place and make things so that they are truly walkable and bikeable, you just don't get people. And that's what really makes a successful project.
Tell me a little bit more about this sense of place that you were describing.
Right. So we talk about human behavior and how we react to things. And so a simple idea around that would be, when you see a building that has a parking lot between the street and the building, it doesn't say walk to here. It says drive to here and park, and then walk into the building. And that's what we see in a lot of our development. In our more walkable areas, we see no parking in front of the building and a large sidewalk, and then access to those buildings. So you get more walking and biking because, again, there's places to park, and you still have to walk to your destination, much like the parking lot first kind of design. But it just makes it seem as if you shouldn't drive there. You should walk there, right? And so that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about placemaking is a sense of place. What makes that place unique? What makes it a place where you would stay or learn or sit or congregate for religious purposes or, have a cup of coffee or go to a shop. There's various things that kind of play into that. But the layout of buildings and the traffic calming measures really play into that sense of place.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to take a short break, so stay tuned in. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm your host, Wanda Bertram. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. I'm here with Scott Thompson. He's the bicycle and pedestrian planning coordinator for the Lexington area. And we're talking about the Lexington Safe Streets Academy. It's a new initiative. It's a demonstration project. We've talked about how this project came to be. Let's hear a little bit more about the demonstration project itself, Scott.
Sure. So I think first maybe just to talk a little bit about why demonstration project. We call it tactical urbanism or a demonstration project. And what that really is it's a very cost-effective, low-cost project that we implement not using full-on materials, right? So we'll use paint and removable delineator posts and things that can redefine what the street looks like. And it's a fraction of the cost of what the full project would be. And so we do these demonstration projects to see if they effectively mitigate what we were trying to do. So we've identified the problems, and then we come up with a design, and then we use this demonstration project to say, did we get it right? So we measure how the street is used before and how the street is used after or during the project implementation. And then if we got the results that we want and needed, then we can move into the full design and construction of the project and spend $30,000 doing the demonstration project instead of $2.5 million on the real project. And if it didn't work, then we're out $2.5 million. And so it's a way, these demonstration projects are really a way to test what we're trying to do, which is improve the safety of biking and walking in a particular area.
Yeah, and this is a very smart tool. It's a tool that Lexington has used for planning before.
Yeah, in some cases, I think the university's done it a little better than we have. It's something that we're trying to kind of streamline the process. We want to empower the citizens of Lexington to do projects like this. There's a lot of community involvement in our town at all levels, right? Downtown urban core, suburban areas as well. And so we want to, one of the things we hope to get out of this is, can we make it so that community organizations can do these small demonstration projects and see if they can really change the environment for biking and walking in their community before we implement the larger scale projects. And it's important, and it's happening all over the country. And so they're really great things.
So how did you go about selecting a demonstration project?
Well, so a couple of things happened. When we came back from Orlando, that was one of the things that we were tasked with, was to determine where our demonstration project was going to be. Our team came up with several ideas and locations, and then we kind of went through the pros and cons of each. We had kind of selected an area, and then one of our team members was also involved in another community initiative called the Citizens Environmental Academy. And there was a team of 5 of them who wanted to dedicate the funding that they got from that environmental academy to this project, and they wanted to work in the north side of town in this particular area. And so that kind of was the icing on the cake, or whatever, the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm not sure what the correct term is there, but that really pushed us in the direction that we wanted to move. The other thing is that we've had a lot of community input in this area already. This area has been identified repeatedly for needs to make it more bikeable and walkable, because people are walking and biking there, and they feel like it's unsafe. And they're right. We look at the crash statistics, and they're right. And so we had some community support already. We had another organization who wanted to get involved, and we knew that the community and the surrounding community were asking for something to fix the problems in this area. And so it really just made sense to do the project here that we're talking about. And that is a small piece of North Limestone between Bryan and Loudon Avenue. Bryan Avenue from Limestone to Castlewood, and then Loudon Avenue from Maple to Limestone. So it kind of makes a figure 8 shape. in there, and that's the project demonstration area that we'll cover as a part of this project.
And so you mentioned obviously making it a collaborative approach made it much stronger, and a lot of community outreach and community involvement in that respect.
Right. So, the North Limestone CDC has been really involved in changing the character of the neighborhoods in this area. And they've worked really grassroots, working with the community and the people who live there to bring in new businesses, to bring in new jobs and opportunities, and to really kind of repurpose a lot of kind of underutilized property. And so they've always been pushing for some changes. I mean, if you're familiar with the night market and that this is part of the project involves the night market area. And so again, we really had that, community support ahead of time. And that's key. I mean, if the community doesn't really have an interest in it, then what's the point, right? And how do we get that momentum to move forwards if our project is successful into that full design phase when it does take a lot of community support and political support to find the funding to complete these projects?
And it sounds like this project, this place had a lot of the elements that you were trying to incorporate into planning that we talked about earlier in the show, the placemaking, place finding.
Yeah, sure. So, I think you'll see that in this comp plan update, one of the goals and objectives is people first design. And we talk about that. We want to design our communities for people, not for anything else, right? We want people to be able to use the spaces and feel comfortable in the spaces and feel safe in the spaces. And I think that's important. And there's already events and coordination going on in this particular area that bring in that sense of place. For instance, that night market, that's a perfect example of how you make place. Most of the time that's a little cut through roadway, but then on Fridays, for several months out of the summer, it becomes a night market. And it really brings people from all over town, not just in that community, and they come and gather in the space that's normally used for cars, and really that's all. And so it really changes how we view the space. And then how can we make that not permanent, but function better and safer outside of those times when we don't have planned events?
Yeah, especially in an area that's really changing anyway and changing how the infrastructure and the place is used in the North Limestone area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see it just in the growth in the private sector businesses that are there and how important that is to building community. And so we think that this is a great location and having, like I said, that initial community support is key, but then also having another group of folks to help us implement and work through the project. The Environmental Academy is key to that. I mean, they're non-governmental, right? It's a group of volunteers. They volunteered their time. They feel like, making our community a better place to live is important to them, and making it greener, making it better water quality, improving air quality, and encouraging biking and walking. And so having them on board and really having them engage in the project is great. And then they're learning a lot about the process and how we get through a project from beginning to end as well. So it's really been great. I mean, the synergy is really good, not only at the community level, but at the volunteer level and then at the governmental level as well.
And I think that's so important that groups work together, not disparately, but realize that they have common goals and common interests, and then really build upon those strengths.
Yeah, one of the things that we talked about in our last Safe Streets Academy workshop was storytelling. And there were some really great examples of communities that really dug in, and before they even did any design work or anything about a project, they just went and talked to the people in the community. And, the questions aren't what kind of a roadway do you want to see, or where do you think there's a good crosswalk? It was just ask them about their lives. What do they know about the area? How long have they lived there? And you get a lot of insight into behavior as a result of that, or sense of community, or not a sense of community. And it was kind of telling for us because we have been out on the ground and talking to people and learning about this area. And I think that's an important part of any process as it relates to development or change or infill and redevelopment, because we think we know things and we end up being totally wrong because we didn't do that part of that process. And so it's been kind of eye-opening for us to approach the public input process differently. We've always sought public input, but sometimes it was just in a different way. And so I think that's something we're going to get from it is how do we change that approach to learning about where these projects are going to go and how it affects the community.
Yeah, it sounds like a much richer, much deeper, much more relationship oriented process.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't expect people to tell us where to put the storm drains or a bench, right, or whatever. But we want to find out how they move through the space. What do they use it for? Why are they here? What do they come to? And where do they work? Where do they live? Where do your kids play, or where do you play, right? And so all those things are important, and it really does tell a story and really help you think a lot about what types of techniques you're going to use to get those desired outcomes.
Great. Well, we're going to take another short break. We'll be right back talking more about the story of the Lexington Safe Streets Academy. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram, and I'm here with Scott Thompson. He's the Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning Coordinator for the Lexington area, and we're talking about the Lexington Safe Streets Academy. It's a demonstration project in the North Limestone area. So, Scott, let's talk a little bit more about the public outreach that you've been undertaking for this project.
Right. So the first part of that was what we call a listening session. So we wanted to kind of canvass the area and let people know that we were going to have a public meeting based around a demonstration project that we really didn't know anything about yet. Right. So we want to say, here's the area that we've defined for this project, and we want input from you. We want you to tell us things so that we can start looking at how do we improve the safety of the roadways and the walkways and the bikeways in this project area. So what we do during a listening session is we put up some maps and we ask some questions. And so one of the questions we asked was, where do you walk on foot? Where do you bike? And where do you drive? And so we had a big map and we had a color for each mode, red for feet, blue for bikes, and green for cars. And we just said, draw some patterns on there. Show us where you go. And it looks like a bunch of scribbly lines on the page, but it's interesting how that overlaid with actual measurable traffic measures, like how many cars a day use the streets and in what direction they use them in. So that was an interesting piece. Another thing that we talk about is what are some barriers to walking and biking and driving? What do you see daily that you see as problems? And so people marked up a giant map and said, here's where we see problems and here's what they are. And some people would mark like an X next to it if they agreed with it, or a check, or, would kind of write a comment about that as well. And so then we kind of organize that on the map and make it a little more detailed so that we can say, okay, from this, here's the areas that we need to focus on. And it was primarily intersections, not just the intersections where the roads all intersect, but intersections with driveways, entrances and exits to businesses and churches and those types of things as well. So it's really telling, and you're hearing like, it's difficult to cross here because of this, or I don't feel safe here, or my kids walk to school and they have to cross this intersection and it's really problematic. And, those types of things are what you get. And the third thing that we ask people is tell us why you stay. What do you do here? Do you just pass through, or do you stop at the broom wagon, or do you stop at Kentucky for Kentucky, or at the parachute factory, or at the tattoo shop, or do you go to one of the places of worship along the corridor? Do you visit Castlewood Park, or do you live here? Is this your house? Is your house in the project area? And where do you go from there? And what do you see as problematic? Or what do you see? What makes you stay, right? And that's telling as well, because again, you kind of do a windshield survey, or you walk around and you kind of look and see what's there, but that's a moment in time. But these people, live there and they're part of the community, and so you can really gather a lot more information about who they are and why they stay in the area, and that can help us determine how we implement the mitigation techniques to either calm traffic or make the crossing safer and those types of things.
So did these sessions and these conversations help you establish what you wanted to achieve in this project, your performance measures?
Yeah, I think so. So, obviously safety is what we're looking at. We want to increase safety across all three modes of travel. We want it to be safer for cars, we want it to be safer for bikes, and we want it to be safer for people on foot. And all those three things coincide. We'd like to see a measured reduction in traffic speed. We think that's important as well. And then we'd like to see an increase in biking and walking as a mode choice. And so we'll measure all of those before the project is implemented, and then during while the project is in place, and see if we've got the desired outcomes that we had hoped for. And that really helps us determine if what we did worked.
So 3 performance measures.
Right. So of those 3 performance measures, I guess I should say one of the exercises that we did as a part of the listening session is we put up kind of examples, picture boards. So we'll put up like 8 examples, and there'll be pictures of sidewalks. And we pick those for various reasons. Like we'll make sure that we have a wide sidewalk with some buffering between the roadway and the sidewalk. And then we might have one that's kind of closer. We might have one that has no separation between the roadway and the sidewalk. We might have one that has seating on it. And we ask people to take 2 green dots and 1 red dot, and they can pick which 2 they like and one that they don't like. And we do that for different types of crosswalks, different types of pedestrian refuge islands, different types of bicycle facilities, different types of intersections. And that gives us a little insight into, one, what people have maybe experienced, right? So like we may put a roundabout out there and somebody may have never even driven through a roundabout or even know what a roundabout is. And then some folks may have seen those, or like a raised crosswalk versus a regular crosswalk. And it's really kind of an anecdotal thing, right? Because there's other factors that determine why someone likes a picture. But it does give us an idea as to what people want to see in their community, and that helps us determine how we move forward with design. And I think that's important.
So based upon what you've heard from people and your performance measures, what you want to accomplish, what exactly is the demonstration project going to do?
Well, we have several intersections that are problematic, and it's mainly based around kind of traffic functionality, right? The cars are confused, the people are confused, so there's a lot of confusion. And, we talk a lot about predictability when we're talking bikes and bike safety, and that holds true across all modes of transportation, right? Everything we do in the transportation world is based around predictability. We want people to know where they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to get there. So we've come up with a couple of different solutions for all of the intersections in this project. And our next phase will be to kind of unveil those 2 options to the community in a public meeting format. And we haven't quite determined when or how we're going to do that, but we are going to do that. And then we'll finalize what that project will look like. We feel like that the 2 solutions for every intersection is a good approach. We're not saying that it's a vote up, down kind of thing. We just want to have a discussion about it. And we think that's important because based on what we've heard from the community and what we think we know, we want to see if we got it right. And so sometimes you find out things that you really didn't think about. When you get into the weeds, that someone from the neighborhood can really give you some insight too. So that'll be our next steps. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to work to change the patterns at the intersections through various measures. Some are kind of traffic calming oriented, so they'll work to narrow at the intersections and kind of slow vehicles down. There's also some vertical element in that helps to slow people down when they feel like they're approaching a narrower corridor. We've got some real problematic crossings and directions at a couple of the intersections that we want to clean up and really determine where people can and can't go. And we think that'll change things. We want to limit some through traffic in an area as well. And I think all of those will be effective solutions for the project, and hopefully the neighborhood will agree. We're hoping that we get that feedback when we get to talk to them next.
Yeah. So before you actually implement any solutions, you're going to go back to your stakeholder groups and make sure that they have some feedback and some consensus into what you're doing.
Right. So we'll be very specific about, so here's the options. So you're going to see one of these things happen. And then here's when it'll happen, right? Because, surprise, we want to make sure everybody's aware that it's happening, and at least enough people so that when people say, what's this, or how did this happen, there's some folks that were informed about it and can at least kind of, bring them up to speed. So those will kind of be our next steps.
And the nature of a demonstration project, will these be permanent, temporary solutions? What will happen?
Right. So most of the time, everything comes out at the end of the demonstration period. In this case, there may be some things that stick around. We're not 100% sure. We're kind of working through the material selections right now. And there are a couple things that we think could be permanent solutions if they're well received. And so we're trying to beef up the temporary solution so that it might stand the test of time between demonstration project and larger, full-scale, real implementation project.
All right. Well, it's time for another break, Scott. So we'll be back with you in a few moments. Hang in. Welcome back to Bike Talk on Lexington Community Radio. I'm your host, Wanda Bertram, and with me is Scott Thompson. He's the Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning Coordinator for the Lexington area, and he's been telling us all about the Lexington Safe Street Academy. It's a demonstration project in the North Limestone area. And Scott, can you tell us a little bit about the timeline for this? You do have a timeline restriction because this is grant funded, right?
So we are well into the project, and we have like I said, a couple of concepts that we need to get out to the public. So our next steps will be having a public meeting, probably in the next 2 weeks, and that's where we'll gather some of that feedback. The actual demonstration project will have to be conducted during the month of April at a minimum. We are likely going to do April and May because of some of the activities that take place in May, but that's still a little bit up in the air. And then after that time is complete, then some of the project or all of the project will come out, and we'll move forwards with our next steps.
And what will your next steps be?
So we are each team, so the Orlando, South Bend, and us have been assigned a consulting team that's kind of been working with us in the background during the workshops and other parts of the Safe Streets Academy. And so we'll be working with them to do all of our performance measures that we talked about earlier. So we'll look at the befores and then the durings, and then we'll produce a case study and a report based around those findings. And so all of those reports will be submitted back to the Safe Streets Academy folks, the National Complete Streets Coalition, and they will publish those and put those out there as a reference for other communities to look to for ways to implement demonstration projects or tactical urbanism in their areas.
So a lot of other communities will be looking at what Lexington was done and what Lexington has learned from this.
That's right. So we realize that there's a lot of benefit in the demonstration projects themselves because it talks about community involvement and development patterns, and has that story that's really associated with how this process went from the beginning to end. But we also get a lot from working together and not operating in silos. I mean, we don't do that as it is anyways. We work well with engineering and traffic engineering and planning. We're constantly interacting with one another, but this has really brought it to a whole nother level of discussion because we get kind of into the day-to-day, the mundaneness of what we do on the regular, and this kind of mixes that up a little bit, and we're having discussions that we don't always have about other projects, and we should be having. And so this is really changing how we look at projects individually, and what we've learned from the other communities and how they go about those same processes have been quite telling and really beneficial to us as well.
Yeah, so this project, even though it's around the physical infrastructure, to a great extent, it's about the process going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. More and more, especially in transportation planning, we're being held to performance measures as it relates to funding. And so there's a lot of new ways to measure and to gather data. And we are really trying to get out in front of that because it does affect the dollars that we get from the federal government and from the state as it relates to projects, the outcomes that we've desired from those projects.
And for us, it's a lot of it is about the outreach and building those relationships as well. So as you move forward, you can keep growing up on that base.
Right. So, if all goes well, we'd like to see this go to full implementation. And that's a long process, and that takes time. And so these demonstration projects really give us an opportunity to do something quick, get something on the ground that doesn't take, the construction alone would take several months, if not a year, right? But we do it in a couple of days, right? And then we get that feedback, but it also kind of brands the project, gains momentum if it's effective. If the people liked it and enjoyed what they saw and really felt like it was better for them and their community, then they'll want to see the project implemented moving forward, and they can push to make sure that that happens. And that's when things get done.
And that's very critical. Do you mind talking about that a little bit? How important is it for communities to really work with their cities about what it is that they desire once they figure out what that is? How do they move projects forward and advocate?
Sure. So, obviously funds are limited. I mean, that's the reality of the world that we live in, and things are expensive. And so, when you want to implement a project in your area, you've got to build a case. You've got to say, this is the problem and we want to fix it. And how do we fix that? And so this process gives you the ability to try something out, measure it, and then go after that funding. And so when you're competing against other areas or other towns or even other cities for dollars, and you can say, well, here's what we've done. We've involved the community. We've talked. We understand the neighborhood and the areas around it. This is what the community is desires. This is what they're asking for. Then we looked at it and we did a demonstration project and we measured the effectiveness of our designs. And here's what the outcomes were. And so moving forwards, not only do we know what we want to do, but we know that it'll work. And that really goes a long ways when you're asking for federal grant dollars for transportation projects. And even in the local community, when you talk about the local level and the local funding levels, that goes a long way with our political officials, your council member and the mayor's office, those kind of things. The people that are making those budgetary decisions want to see successful projects. And so when you can come to them and say, hey, not only do we think this is going to work, we've tried it. And we know it's going to work. And so we think this is an effective use of our tax dollars.
So the demonstration project, when you think long term, it's very important for our city, how we work within and among ourselves, but also how we work with other cities to improve our planning processes.
Sure. It's never good to isolate yourselves in any way. I mean, everything is about community, neighbors, public health, safety, economic growth, economic development, job creation, all those things. And that's what every community desires. Everybody wants to live in a great place and have great neighborhoods, and feel safe and feel like they have opportunities. And so it's good to look at what other communities are doing that are not only similar to you, but that maybe are a little bit smaller, or a little bit bigger. And I think that's what's unique about this is that, South Bend is that smaller city, but they're also a university kind of town. It's Notre Dame and South Bend, but they're only about 115,000 people. And then we're kind of in the middle of that. We're 300,000 plus, a couple of universities here. But we definitely work a lot with the universities and the surrounding community. And then there's Orlando, which is this giant mega sprawl metropolis, right? Now they're urbanized area, their downtown area is smaller, but they're looking at a different beast altogether. They have multiple government agencies operating in the area. And so, there's a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of things you learn that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. And so we're able to communicate, work back and forth, and build those connections and be able to rely on those folks for information when we ask for it.
Going forward, even after the demonstration project is over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that we see more and more is in every aspect of transportation. Sharing is big, and we live in an age where data is available, and we need to use that data to make smart decisions. And learning from other communities is how you do it. I mean, it's to me, there is no original idea, right? We always learn from our experiences, and so I think that's what really we get from this is the ability to go and learn in this environment, and then take what we've learned and bring it home and see how it applies to our community.
So, Scott, can people who are listening still get involved in this project? Is it too late?
No, not at all. So, one, we'll be looking for volunteers to help us with the implementation of the project. And then we also want to get that last bit of community feedback. And so, at our final public meeting, we will talk about the process that we've been through so far. So there'll be an opportunity to see kind of what kind of input we gathered and what we've done up to this point. And then we'll be asking for some input on the conceptual designs so that we can go ahead and move into that demonstration project implementation phase. So you can get that information from the North Lime CDC. Heather Hayden is who the contact there, and she can link you up with us. She's kind of been our one-stop shop for community connectivity. That's her specialty, and she's done a great job of helping us out with that and really organizing the Citizens Environmental Academy and us around a volunteer group to get out in the community and spread the word.
So the North Limestone CDC, very instrumental in helping pull this off, and they're located in the North Limestone corridor as well. I think it's 714 North Limestone.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Yeah. So people can call them, stop by and see them, get involved. And I'm sure they're putting information out into the neighborhood as things develop and evolve.
Absolutely. That's been our primary point for neighborhood and local business outreach. So.
All right. Well, Scott, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for today's show. We really, really appreciate you being here and enlightening us on this project.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you about these things.
Yeah, I enjoyed you too. And don't forget to tune in to Bike Talk at the same time next week for all things cycling, helping you get out, explore our towns and countryside in Lexington and beyond. Thanks for joining us. Be safe and enjoy the ride.